Watching any TV? You know what I was watching with my girlfriend is Dexter. I mean, it's like awful, but it rocks. We're on the second season. I've watched it. I watched like a couple seasons of it a while ago, but it's so interesting. The premise of it is really good as a concept. Is like serial killer who only kills for good. Is like I think that's well done. I think that's cool, especially how they produce conflict in the first season with his brother. But it's just like so like the writing is just bad. The writing is just like they're carried so hard by the premise, and it's fascinating their image of I guess I would describe it as psychopathy, although not quite because it's different. Like Dexter probably I don't know if Dexter is a sociopath. I don't actually think Dexter is written as a sociopath. He's written as like people's image of a sociopath, or sorry, Dexter isn't a psychopath. He probably is a sociopath, I guess, clinically. Um, but the image is just like, and maybe this changes as it moves on. The image is basically like he went through this insane traumatic thing as a kid, and then he's just cooked. Like it's just yeah, you want to murder people. It's just like yeah, you want to murder people now. That's what you gain joy from, and you don't understand anyone, and there's kind of nothing. Like there's just a switch that was flicked, and maybe it's partially biological because it's like it happens. The exact same condition happens to his brother, who also experiences it. It's the season one spoilers. I don't know. It's a pretty old show. Is the lore that his dad convinced him of that? I don't think that's true, because his brother is also like that. In fact, his brother is worse. Like the cop, like helps him. The cop helps him. His dad cop, who's not his dad, like helps him develop empathy, which is a part of why he's like not really associate. Like he's not a psychopath because he clearly does have empathy and a sense of moral obligation, but it does kind of show like the general image of like how people view I think sadism even in society, how people view serial killers as like, something bad happened because other bad people are doing fucked up things because they hate everyone. And it makes you a bad person who does fucked up things. Just like because, like I think the obsession with the serial killer. I mean, I guess it's a distinct American thing, but it's also like I don't know. Ever since I did a class on Locke or like a seminar on Locke a couple years ago, I guess that was 7 years ago. It's not a couple. My goodness, I'm getting old. Um, a lot of like Lockean political theory and how they deal with harm and crime, which is becomes a kind of assumption of like liberal democratic justice systems, um, is kind of connected to this idea of like the criminal is outside of reason and logic. Like Locke says, they're like a lion or a tiger. They're just like a part of this. They're back in the state of nature, and you can kind of do whatever you want to them. Like you can murder them. It's fine. They broken the social contract. They are without reason. Like let's not think about why that happens. It just kind of happens, and the justice system is supposed to deal with that by like specifically during the act. I guess they're out of social contract. There's it is just to do whatever you want with them. You can kill them, whatever. And like that it kind of becomes how people conceive of crime is like there are bad guys and they do bad things, and there isn't really a reason for that. They just do, and maybe it's because other people are bad guys and they do bad things. But we just have to deal with the consequences of that. So left as you could say it. I mean, sometimes. But yeah, it's like people don't want to think of why harm happens, why people hurt each other, which is why the serial killer image is so powerful, despite like the very low likelihood of you dying to a serial killer. But yeah, the image of the serial killer is just like it's a guy who does evil things because he's a sadist and he wants to do bad stuff. And like there's nothing you can do for someone like that. They always want to be bad. Um there isn't like it's why Ted Bundy is so important. And I did like I made the mistake of watching one of those like documentaries on Ted Bundy, and they are all his victims are just Liv Agars. like so they're so aggressively Liv Agars, um, which is I don't think it's funny, but it is. Because like you can't even point for Bundy. Like what happened? Why was he like that? Maybe someone has done a more in depth thing than my very vague impression of this story. But it's like, oh yeah, he got like a good upbringing. I think there's something. Isn't there something about his grandfather being abusive? But there's nothing conclusive in his early life, his childhood. That's like, oh yeah. And I think, or maybe that people are attracted to that story because if you can't point to actual abuse, it's like, oh yeah, he's just like that. Like there are just people out there who do bad things, and we need a state to protect. We need a very overreaching justice system to protect people from that. The Ted Bundy fandom after is crazy. That is something that does surprise me. He was an extremely close. I don't think so. I think he quite enjoyed raping and murdering women. I feel like he was probably attracted to women. I think that's probably likely. Serial killer fandom, yeah. And escaped a bunch of times. The escape stories are insane. Because it's wild to be like, yeah, no, you caught me for the murders. And then you escape, and then you do more murders. And always like the answer always about like it's either they're born evil or something evil caused them. The thing that caused them to be evil is never like, oh, I guess like we should probably fund social programs or something. We should probably make it so that like poverty is a lot less bad than it is now. Or something like it's always like, oh, there's another guy who is super evil. Like the answer always to harm always happens to just be more justice system, like with more cops. Um, there's no desire to interrogate it further than that. It's a way of viewing harm that like doesn't center on harm. It centers on power and maintaining these organs of power because they need a justification for themselves. Because if they didn't have a justification and it was just like, yeah, there's just a guy who walks around and like who went out of high school and was like, I want to be the guy who is the most powerful and who can walk around and can just fuck with you. And there's like something you can do about it, especially if you're white, especially if you're more affluent. But like a lot of times there really isn't anything you can do with it about it. Like that's a terrifying concept, but you have to make people afraid more of this kind of nebulous image of harm. Of like, well, at least like we don't have to deal with that. Or we don't have to deal with it as much.